I spent the last 10 years watching over 1,000 hours of production tutorials and spent another 10,000 hours working on implementing what was in these tutorials. I'm summarizing all of that down to these 11 tips which will save you years as a music producer. If you want to get better at making music, grow your music business, and stop being confused by all the contradicting advice, this is the video for you. There are some tips later in the video I barely see mentioned anywhere else, so I definitely recommend sticking until the end. The first tip is get good at starting tracks. So many people sit down at their computer, they're ready to start making music and they immediately get stuck. That could have been the session where they produce their best track yet, a beat or video that goes viral or gets placed. You miss out on hundreds of opportunities by getting stuck when you start making music. Before you even place in one note or load in one sample, there are some settings that you want to have correct. The first one is the BPM. If you know what genre you're trying to produce in, I definitely recommend sticking within the BPM range for that genre. There's nothing wrong with experimenting, but you can ruin the opportunity of getting a beat placement or a sale if you're well outside of this range, because it's really hard for musicians to work with and can also be weird for listeners to listen to. This guide here shows you the recommended BPM ranges for top genres. I definitely recommend keeping it if you get stuck when creating a track. If you get stuck when making a melody, it's very easy to use a free chord tool, a MIDI pack, or a melody pack as a starting point. For example, FL Studio just added a new update where if you click Alt-P, you can generate a chord progression, and if you right-click here, you can select whichever scale you want, you can select how many chords there are, and you can even go and change any of these manually if you don't like it. There's also sample libraries like the Emotional Essence library, where you pick whichever emotion you want to produce in, and there's chords, samples, melodies, and MIDI that you can drag and drop straight into any plugin or DAW. It is 90% off, so click the link in the description to get that. The next tip is to have a good backbone in your tracks. I consider the chord progression and the bass line to be the backbone. If they don't have the emotion, the feeling, and the rhythm that you want to convey in your track is going to be lifeless and your listeners aren't going to be paying attention. If you're stuck when creating a bass line, you can go and use a chord tool. For example, in FL Studio, you can go into View, Scale, Highlighting, and select the minor natural, for example. Here you can go and place down a bass line. And then using these ghost notes, you can go and build chords around these notes. And these chords and root notes are really going to carry the feeling of your track. I remember always getting stuck by having a melody that didn't have the kind of feeling or progression that I wanted it to have. And this all goes back to me not knowing how to create the right root notes and chords. If you're stuck, go and do some research on the top chord progressions for the songs in the style you're trying to create, or just spend a lot of time messing around in the piano roll or a chord progression tool until you're getting the feeling that you want. The next very important tip is having the right sound selection. This includes picking the sound for your melodies and for your drum samples. There are so many iconic samples like the Lotus flute, which is used often in trap beats, the mustard chant that's used very often in R&B tracks, and the spins 808 that's used in so many hip-hop trap beats. I'm not saying to use this in all your tracks, but there's a reason why these sounds are used over and over again in top songs. It's because they fit perfectly into that genre. And it's not just having the right samples, it's also having lots of samples. If you're stuck using the same samples, plugins, presets, packs, your tracks are going to sound generic and it's going to feel like you're making the same song over and over again. I definitely recommend going on Reddit, going to waveground.com, or wherever it is that you get your resources, and going and downloading sample packs, preset packs, melody packs, chord packs, and more for whatever style that is. Let's just say you wanted to branch out and make a pop track. If you're using the Spins 808, it's going to sound way too over the top, whereas a pop 808 might sound way too weak for a hip hop beat. If you level up your sample library and the diversity of your samples, it's going to level up your music quality and the diversity of your music. The next tip is perfecting your drum sequencing. Your drums carry the rhythm for your track. It can either make your track bouncy and energetic, or it can make it feel really smooth and soulful. If you want to get that bouncy hip hop vibe in your hi-hats, I definitely recommend chopping up your hi-hats, adding hi-hat rolls like this with changes in panning and velocity, going and adding in different fill hi-hats, changing around the hi-hat pitch, and trying to find the perfect balance between simplicity and energy. In this track, I alternate between this simple two-step hi-hat sequence here and that bouncier hi-hat. You can also add bounce to your track by adding in fill snares, like these ones here, for example. And another not very well known tip is adding variations in your kick and your bass. Listen to the differences in this 808 sequence versus the kick in the background. Some producers just copy their kick onto their 808 or vice versa, and it sounds quite boring and you're missing out on so much bounce and energy. Whereas if you're going for a dance, smoother vibe, it's going to be more of a kick snare with an open hi-hat in the middle, just like this. The next tip is to clean up your mix. It's honestly the biggest mistake that most producers make whenever I listen to their beats. Either the drums are way too quiet, or the melody is way too overpowering and covers everything up, or they left absolutely no room for an artist or vocalist on the track. I've dropped lots of really popular mixing guides, but to summarize all of it down, go through each layer one by one and go and set the volume. I recommend starting with the melodies and starting really quiet. You can also go and use an EQ to cut some of the low end out of the melodies, which is going to make it so much easier for you to make the bass really hit without it clashing or sounding distorted. It can be helpful to mix in mono, which is going to make it easier to hit the levels. And if you're not sure about the mix, go and listen to another beat or a reference track. Listen to the levels of each instrument, and if you don't know what to do in your beat, I recommend going and copying it, seeing how it sounds, and then making tweaks from there. With the final mix being at around -6 to -3 decibels. You can open up a soft clipper or a maximizer to really boost the volume. And it's going to be really punchy, but it's not going to be distorted. You may have also noticed this hi-hat here. This is a slightly more advanced mixing technique, but I went and added a Fruity P controller onto the kick and essentially sidechained it to the hi-hat by right-clicking, clicking link to controller, and using these settings here. When the kick comes in, it lowers the volume of the hi-hat and gives the impression that the kick is louder than it is, so it makes the track sound bouncier and punchier without having to actually increase the volume of the kick. Arranging is very important. If you're sending out tracks or beats to get a vocalist or rapper on it, when they're listening to it, they're going to be writing to it or thinking about how lyrics can fit on the track. If the arrangement is really bad, it's over the top, or it's boring, you're going to mess up your chances of them choosing to use this track. I definitely recommend looking at and analyzing the arrangement of top songs in the style that you're creating. You can even go and download the MP3 for the instrumental, match the BPM to your track, and go and copy the arrangement of this song. Some people will claim that that's unoriginal, but keep in mind, if you're sending a beat out for a placement or someone's buying the beat themselves, it's extremely likely that they're going to go in, chop up the layers and the timing anyways, so you just want your arrangement to be the most appealing version, because they're probably going to go in and tweak it and change it later. The next thing that's very important to learn is how to export and send out your tracks. Different streaming platforms have different recommendations for how to upload their music. Different beat selling platforms have lots of different ways to upload the beats, and lots of industry artists and engineers have proper expectations for how to send your beats if you're looking to send them placements. When uploading your music to streaming platforms, I recommend learning what LUFS is. This is a measurement of loudness, and different streaming platforms have different recommendations for how to upload the beats. You can use a mastering plugin like iZotope Ozone 9, and you can go and actually change the LUFS to whatever you want. For example, you can have a look at what Spotify recommends, set it to that one, and it's going to change the loudness of the track. I definitely recommend going and re-exporting your track at all of these different loudness levels to maximize the listener's enjoyment. When selling your beats on BeatStars, for example, you want the MP3 to be hitting really loud. This makes it sound really good when people are previewing the beats on your website, but when you're exporting the track outs, I recommend making the WAV file a little bit quieter, which makes it a bit easier to mix. And when you export the track outs, you're going to have a version of the master which doesn't have that soft clipper or maximizer, which is going to give complete creative control to any artist that buy the track outs. When sending beats out for placements, you'll want to make sure that there's a tag on your beat to protect them. You'll want to add your Instagram handle, for example, at the end of the beat, because some people will come back a year later and use a beat, and you want them to be able to identify who it is so they can contact you. I recommend sending a couple of MP3s at a lower bit rate so that you can upload all of them without having to use Google Drive. And then I recommend also including a link to a Dropbox or a Google Drive where they can go and get the stems if they want to use them. Some producers will put up different walls and add different roadblocks, like saying, hey, contact me if you want the stems. Some of these artists get sent thousands of beats, so I recommend making it as easy as possible for them to use these tracks and get the track outs. Another very important tip is expanding your network. If you're looking to get placements, I definitely recommend trying to get in with some A&Rs, some engineers, and some other producers in the studio. It's also often worth networking with smaller artists that are signed to bigger labels, because to try and pump up these artist numbers, they're going to get features from some bigger artists, so you can get your beats heard by these bigger artists or produce a track that they're featuring on. One of the best ways to do this is look at who the label is following and try and find these big artists, have a look at who they're following and reach out and send free beats to these smaller artists to try and get in early. If you're looking to grow a business, grow a website, or grow different social media channels, I recommend reaching out to and trying to connect with some of the big names in the business. Go and try and find different YouTubers, go and try and find different business owners and try and connect with them, work with them, offer anything for free, or just get your foot in the door. There were lots of production companies that I worked with for free. I found different areas they could improve in with email marketing, running ads, or different typos or mistakes on their website. Not only did this help them for free, but it also showed them I had different skills in these areas, which made it more likely for them to want to work with me in the future or ask for more advice. Tip number 10 is growing your brand. I definitely recommend having a clean social media page because this is essentially your resume in modern times. Post placements, post different achievements, different plaques, and also different reviews for your brand, product, or site. And this is going to build so much trust when people see your brand. I definitely also recommend attaching your name and picture to a brand. If you're hiding behind a logo, there's going to be no reason for people to trust you. Another great way to build up a relationship with your audience and build your brand is by going and using social media, posting every single day, and building trust with these people. There's a theory that it takes 7 different touches to get someone to buy something from you. This could be seeing an ad, seeing a post, seeing someone else mention you on their story or tag you in a post, hearing one of your songs, getting a DM from you. Whatever it is, you want to get as many of these brand impressions in as possible to skyrocket the trust someone has with you and increase the chance they work with you or buy something off you. Tip number 11 is to increase your productivity. A great way to do that is increase the speed at which you start and finish tracks. You can get sample libraries like the Emotional Essence library. You can get different plugins or tools which makes it easier to mix, master, generate chord progressions, generate drum sequences. And even though I'm a massive supporter of doing everything from scratch, if it's the difference between you not starting or finishing a track and having a finished track, I recommend using these tools. When it comes to the marketing and exporting side of things, I definitely recommend finding as many different automations and tools as possible. I have tools for renaming audio files, tagging them, normalizing them, tuning 808s, replying to common DMs and customer support requests. All of these things save hours every single day, and I recommend testing and finding as much technology as you can to increase your productivity when making music, when exporting your tracks, when sending it out, when dealing with customers and potential customers, and even when sending out different contracts and templates, or when you're sending out beats for placements. These 11 tips saved me thousands of hours, helped me get in contact with so many producers, artists, businesses, and customers, and helped me build the businesses I work on full time today. I hope you learned so much from all of these tips and use them to grow your brand, business, and increase the quality of your music. If you want to get the Emotional Essence library, which will increase your productivity and music quality, click the link in the description to get it for 90% off today. If you want to learn how top producers make their beats and learn some behind the scenes strategies and secrets, click one of the recommended videos, and I hope to see you there.